Mets have signed a former New York Yankee. It's just not the name that you might have been expecting. As we welcome you to episode number 52 of The Queen's Connection, a production of Patton Sports Grave. I am your host, Andrew Patton, joined by the co-host, Corne Hogeveen. Corne, I said the Mets signed a former Yankee. I guess we could say they signed two former Yankees, although one of the quote-unquote former Yankees played with two teams last year. But the Mets are making moves before their front office contingent heads to Dallas for the winter meetings that start tomorrow. So, like we talked about, we say it every episode, the Mets have been the most active team or one of the most active teams in Major League Baseball, and David Stearns continues that trend.
Definitely, I think the Mets have put together a big piece of their rotation with obviously the two moves they make. I still think there is work left to be done, and I still think there will be other stunning pitchers added. But pretty early in the offseason, I think there were 12 top 50 players that were signed until today. So that means that you still have a lot of players left on the market. The Mets have done a pretty hefty job already in a hefty offseason with lots to talk about. But yeah, there's waiting for one big fish who's going to sign any moment.
Yes, we're recording this on Sunday, December 8th, a football Sunday, if you're listening in the United States. But yeah, you mentioned the big fish that's yet to be reeled in by anyone, but seems like we'll have an answer on the Juan Soto stuff pretty soon. I believe the latest was from John Heyman of the New York Post saying both the Mets and Yankees have upped their offers into the 730 million dollar range for about a 15-year span, I believe was said. The Mets are believed to have the slightly higher offer. Sox, Jays, Dodgers, they're still involved from what I've been seeing and reading. But I think it was also Heyman who said, expect a decision in the next 24 to 48 hours. And he put that article out on Saturday night. So we're close to hitting the 24-hour mark. But the Soto stuff seems like it's coming to an end. Whether he's in Queens, the Bronx, Boston, north of the border, if you're an American, no, it remains to be seen as nothing has really leaked out much from, like from where Soto's leaning. But I always said if the offers are close, I think it goes back to the Yankees. But we won't have an answer at least right now as of we're recording, but we'll get an answer pretty soon. So, you still confident? I know you're very much a Soto to the Mets. You feel confident about that. You still feel the same way?
Yeah, I'm still confident that Soto will land in the Mets, and it's not for me. It's not just the money. Obviously, the money helps. I think without Steve Cohen there, there's a fair question if the Mets were in this conversation. I think not. So obviously the money Steve Cohen has helps, but I also think that the Mets have a plus with their general manager, with their owner. Uh, Stearns is one of the brightest guys, I believe, in the majors. So I think that's a plus for Soto. And also, I think if you look at the roster and if you look at the minor leagues, I think the Mets have an edge there too. With the Mets, I think the main plus for Soto obviously is being next to arguably the best hitter in the game, which the Mets don't have. But yeah, you could see Soto wanting to be that guy in his 15-year contract time, and that's with the Mets. So I'm focusing mostly on the Yankees and the Mets because I think it's going to be between them. Um, Although Boston is a sneaky one, also uh, Greg Breslow has done a decent job there. I think they are planning on something big there in Boston to also provide a winning culture. But I think the Mets do have the edge with Steve Cohen, with David Stearns, and with the prospects they have to build a consistent winner, and also see how the Mets have done with their pitching, with their players, overperforming. I think that also helps, showing a guy like Soto that there's something truly special in the works for the Mets, and hopefully he wants to join it.
Yeah, while you're talking about all the reasons why Soto should sign with the Mets, and obviously a lot of valid reasons, you talk about the leadership with on the field, off the field with Mendoza and Stearns and Steve Cohen, and some of the arguments you make about well, the Mets have a you know, they got some decent young players, some at the major league level, some working their way up. Those are some arguments, the Red Sox can make it in their camp. Obviously, Alex Cora is a very well regarded manager. The book's still out on Breslow. There's a lot of question marks about John Henry, so some of that stuff maybe we compared it to the Mets have the advantage there, but the Red Sox also have some good core players at the major league level. They got one of the best farm systems in baseball, and I think also too if Soto did go to Boston, that's a situation where he's going to be the guy. He is the star attraction for the Boston Red Sox as much as Rafi Devers is an extremely good player. I mean Soto's on a different level than Rafi Devers. So the Sox have I don't want to say scared me, but I think people kind of laughed when the Red Sox were a team mentioned early in this process just because of what they had done recently when it came to off-season moves and not being the Boston Red Sox like they were in the early 2000s. Maybe there's a little bit of a change there with Craig Breslow as their president of baseball ops. So I mean, I don't count the Red Sox out. I don't think it's going to be Toronto. I don't think it's going to be LA. I think it's going to be either one of the New York teams or Boston, and I think Boston makes a very compelling case uh, for why they could be a destination for Juan Soto. But like we said, it remains to be seen. Obviously, where everyone's refreshing Twitter and checking Jeff Passan and everyone like every 5 minutes or so. But that's the latest on Juan Soto. Um, so a potential move the Mets could make. Let's transition to moves the Mets have made, and we'll start out with Frankie Montas, who signed a 2-year, $34 million deal. It's an opt out after the 2025 season. So, very much like the deal Sean Manaea got about a year ago. Um, Montas obviously uh, has a reputation just due to his time with the Yankees because, he came over from Oakland, was pitching well for the A's, but then went to the Yankees and things just went downhill from there. He had a shoulder surgery. He made one appearance for the Yankees and 2023, and then signed a show me deal with the Reds last year. Eventually got traded to Milwaukee, um, and hit the market this year. So David Stearns picks him up. Just your initial thoughts when the on the Frankie Montas coming to the Mets. What do you think the Mets found appealing about him? And obviously, he made the Sean Manaea comparison. Frankie Montas is going to go to the lab. So, what do you think Hefner and company are going to be working on when it comes to Frankie Montas?
Well, my initial reaction is different than the reaction I have after looking into some stuff. My initial reaction was, or your words, meh,
Meh.
in your favorite word, meh. I wasn't necessarily too happy. I remember last um, trade deadline that Montes was mentioned, I think, in our chat or maybe in the podcast. I'm not sure. That I also was mad. I don't want Montes, so now he is a mad. So yeah, then you're gonna start looking at it, and I like to to look at the positives instead of the negatives. So luckily, uh, don't look at the baseball front page from last year. That's not where you're gonna find a lot of positive about Frankie Montas. Mostly the positive is after Montas went to the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Milwaukee Brewers did Milwaukee Brewers things. The K rate increased, and he improved his four-seam fastball whiff, throwing it from a higher arm slot. Whiff went up from 19% to 27%. Velo was a tick up too. He added some depth to the slider. Cutter became better. Um, He used the four seamer less, splitter less, slider less, so he became more of a cutter sinker pitcher. While sinker was overall in the season was still good. It a little bit didn't do as well in Milwaukee, but the cutter was a tremendous pitch for him in Milwaukee. And the four seam fastball, splitter, slider are three good pitches. Especially the change in the whiff rate on the four seamer, I think is pretty hefty. So he showed better stuff. He had an 11 K per nine with Milwaukee, which is really, really good. I saw somewhere, if I correct that, he was sixth after the trade in K rate for starting pitchers. So definitely the Brewers started something there. And the Mets was the same with Sean Manaea when Sean Manaea added that sweeper last year with the Giants. He became a better pitcher, and then the Mets got him even better. And I think Manaea did it himself as well with the arm angle. And I think the Montas deal is something like that. They saw some positives in Montas already with the Brewers making some adjustments. And I think they believe that those adjustments can work even better with us, with maybe some tinkering, maybe a change of his arsenal, pitch selection, um, or shapes. We know that the Mets do a tremendous job in that department. So after reading into that, I think there's definitely something to get with Frankie Montas. If not, it's not that big of a risk. 70 million sounds a lot per year, but if you look at the pitching market, it's not that much right now. It's just we have to stop thinking about how it used to be. It's different. It's a different time, and pitching is expensive. So yeah, a mediocre pitcher gets $70 million. Severino, who was one of the worst starters last year, I think he got $30 million last year. So it's part of the game. It's part of recent baseball. So 70 million. I don't care about 70 million. Only thing I might care a little bit about is that 2-year deal with an opt-out, because that's a risk for the Mets, another risk for Frankie Montas. But it worked last year, so trust Stearns. Stearns knows. And I wanna give Isaac Grossman some kudos for the information about what he changed in Milwaukee. I think it's always good to give out the kudos to the people who actually came up with the information I get.
Yeah, when I first heard or first saw that, because he sent me the Jeff Passan tweet link that the Mets had signed Frankie Montas, my first reaction was I don't love it like I loved when they signed Severino, because that I mean it's a similar contract to Manaea, but I kind of view Montas as like a Severino when it comes to pitch arsenal and having more high velo and whatnot. So I didn't love it like I when the Mets signed Severino, but I get what the Mets are going at here with Frankie Montas, and it's interesting because I mean I know you said don't look at the Baseball Savant page for Frankie Montas, and when it comes to percentiles and stuff like that, I look more at like the pitch usage and stuff like that, and obviously a third of the time he used his four seamer. Same usage for sinker cutter. They're both at 19%, a split at 18%, so that was pretty close there. Slider 11%. So a five pitch mix. And we know, or I shouldn't say we know, but just kind of based on the pitchers that Stearns has acquired in his Mets tenure, um, if they have sinkers or cutters in their repertoire, it seems like he finds those guys very appealing. And even if a guy comes in and doesn't have a sinker, like Tyler McGill didn't have a sinker last year until he came back up, for that September stretch, they develop sinkers. So sinkers are a pitch du jour for David Stearns. But Montas used the four seamer more last season, and you might have mentioned this when you were going through what you found appealing about Frankie Montas. but I'll ask the question again, and you can repeat the same answer if you had said this already. But do you just looking at the numbers from last year overall? Now, obviously, things changed in Milwaukee um, for Frankie Montas, but would you expect to see the four seamer usage go down from last year and the sinker usage to bump back up, or do you think the Mets kind of looked at what he did with Milwaukee, and if the four seamer was working well in Milwaukee, kind of be like, why don't you just keep rolling with the four seamer and we'll continue to develop the sinker and see how that comes along?
It's a tough question. If you look at his total season, because the run value on the sinker was better, but if you look at what he changed his arm slot a bit in Milwaukee. So with that, the sinker overall didn't do as good as what you would expect if you look at this baseball savant page. So it depends a little bit on that because the other pitches did perform better with the higher arm slot. So I think it's going to be maybe a little bit more the cutter, with which, if you again look at the baseball savant page, you don't love what the numbers were against the cutter, but from what I've seen, the cutter was tremendous with the Brewers and awful with the Reds. So the overall numbers obviously don't tell the full story there with what he did with the Brewers. So the cutter became a very good pitch for him. The splitter is a good pitch for him. The four seamer was a good pitch with using it a little bit less. So I see maybe the four seamer used a little bit less because that worked, and the cutter a little bit more with the sinker. So kind of like those three pitches a little bit more even than just more four seamer. But I think the cutter is going to be a bigger weapon for him. I don't know out of the top of my head what the total percentage was um, in the year. Hopefully you have it in front of you, but I think that's the pitch that's going to increase um, with the force with the sinker maybe a little bit decreasing because of the lack of success he had in Milwaukee on it. I thought he had like a 383 WOBA against the sinker, if I read it correctly, by Isaac Grossman. So that's not great. And his hard hit rate went up when it was in Milwaukee. So yeah, I mean, if you look at what he did with Milwaukee, which got him to a little lower ERA and a far better strikeout rate, I think they're gonna try to duplicate that and maybe get a little bit more outs instead of some hard hit contact. And I think with the cutter, yeah, like I said, the slider is probably also one that's gonna used a little bit more. But I think the cutter is the biggest pitch that I wouldn't be surprised if next year we see a cutter, maybe one of the two biggest used pitches.
It'll be interesting to see how uh, the Mets utilize Jeremy Hefner or utilize Frankie Montas with Jeremy Hefner taking the charge. We should just call Jeremy Hefner like Dr. Frankenstein because he just takes these guys and recreates them, and they. I mean, they're not causing terror like like Frankenstein's monster, but they go out and they pitch really well. So I guess they cause harm to hitters, maybe. So I don't know.
We are terror for other teams,
Right,
not
right.
for us,
Not for us.
but for other teams.
Not for the Mets or the Mets fans, but for the
Yeah,
other 29 teams in
yeah.
the league. Yeah. But Frankie Montas, he talked to the media the other day. The one thing, I mean, it's a 12-minute thing. I don't think you really get much out of these press conferences or whatever. But someone asked him, I can't remember who, maybe it was Tacoma or whatever. They're like, what changed from Cincinnati to Milwaukee? And obviously, you talked about some pitch usage changes and whatnot, but he also said because we talked about at the top, he was coming off the shoulder surgery. He said he felt a lot more confident with his shoulder and his arm. He felt better, like he could actually trust. He didn't have to worry in the back of his head about is he going to hurt himself or whatnot. So to kind of get that out of the way too, from a mental standpoint, probably helped as well. Um, so Frankie Montas, a former New York Yankee, now a New York Mets. So I guess we shouldn't say welcome to New York. I guess we should say welcome to Queens. And we could very much say the same thing about the most recent Mets signing. Um, Now, this was one that I found very interesting. When I sent you the link to the initial reports that the Mets were interested in converting this guy from a reliever to a starter, you were on board right away. You didn't have to think about it. You without hesitation, you were like, this can work really, really well. Some people might not feel the same way. Um, I think I'm open minded to this. I'm not sure how it's going to go because we've seen it work well with some guys. We've seen it go poorly with other guys. But the Mets signed Clay Holmes, the former Yankee closer and setup man towards the end of last season, to a 3-year, $38 million deal with an opt out after the second year of the contract. And the idea is, like we mentioned, the Mets are going to look to convert Clay Holmes from a reliever to a starter. Now, Clay Holmes came up as a starter with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He made 4 starts and then pretty much got shelved and sent to the bullpen and went to the Yankees in 21 and really burst onto the scene, becoming a really good, solid reliever. Despite how some people might feel about Clay Holmes with the blown saves and everything that happened last season, Clay Holmes still a very, very good arm. He is now a member of the New York Mets, and obviously, like I said, this has some mixed. People have mixed feelings about this move by David Stearns and trying to convert Clay Holmes back to a starter role. So for you, who, right, like I said, you were on it from the start. You're like, this could, I like this. I think this could really work for the Mets and Clay Holmes. So for the people that are skeptical or not being as open minded, maybe about this conversion, give us your pitch. This does not make your pitch, but give us a pitch as to why Clay Holmes as a starting pitcher can be very, very successful.
Well, first of all, he has 3++ pitches, and that's where he's going to start with right now. That sinker, the sinker, the sweeper, the slider. It's 3+ pitches with great stuff. You have a stat called Stuff Plus. I don't know exactly what Stuff Plus means. There's probably some very smart dudes that know exactly how they measure that, but it's all way above average. So it shows that he has 3 very, very good pitches. So not just not just good pitches. You can almost call it elite pitches, and that's the starting point. And I think three elite pitches can get you very far. I mean, remember Johan Santana who threw the fastball, slider, changeup, 3 elite pitches, and that's all he needed. Also, Clay Holmes pitched with the Yankees, who not only not always get the best out of them. I think they did if you compare it to the Pirates, but the Pirates have a knack, especially in that time period when Clay Holmes was with the Pirates, to not get the best out of their pitchers. I think we see numerous examples where pitchers left the Pirates and became stars. Garrett Cole, Tyler Glasnow, they all had some work with the Pirates and didn't do tremendously, and then they did great somewhere else. They became stars. Not saying that Holmes became a star. He became a very, very good reliever. And another thing that's really, really important in my opinion is that this guy gets ground balls. He was in the 100th percentile in ground ball rate. If you want to be a starter, it's important to also limit those hard hit contacts and keep the ball on the ground, get some quicker outs. And with that sinker, he has the ability to get that. I mean, the 100th percentile just means he has the best ground ball rate in the major leagues. So that are 2 points that I think will work very, very well for him. The only thing that I think he should add is some kind of weapon against left-handed hitters. Let's say a changeup, let's say maybe a split finger. But we saw already that this was in the works before we came aware. So Clay Holmes probably had that in mind from the moment that he signed, before he signed, obviously. So I bet that Clay Holmes is already working on adding some type of weapon in his arsenal to face lefties. So I have complete confidence that he will be able to do that with a full off season. Obviously, coming from the relievers, from the bullpen, you probably hopefully get 120, 130 in innings, maybe even more. I hope more. That would be great. But the workload is something that we might see differently. But I think with if you add another arm, then you have provided some depth for him. So I'm good with that too. The walk rate is a little bit scary, but maybe not needing to close a game out, not being the guy that needs to throw the perfect pitch every time actually works for him. I think it does. Just throw that sinker if you want to get out of an inning or you're 3-1 down. Just throw that sinker and let them make the outs. And if you are 4-2 ahead, for example, in the third inning, it's a lot different than you are 4-2 ahead in the ninth inning. So I think that mentality for him could help. So he could maybe attack hitters a little bit different. Honestly, I think this is going to be the steal of the offseason. When we look at it next year and talk about this, and hopefully we remember that I said this, I think Clay Holmes, with how expensive the starting pitching market is, little under $30 million per year is peanuts for a starting pitcher. And even if he doesn't pan out in the rotation, you have always have the ability or the option to bring him back to the bullpen, and you have a very good bullpen arm, maybe even a little bit of a stretched out bullpen arm, which could be money for you if it doesn't work out. So even if it doesn't win in him being in the rotation, you still have a good arm. He's not gonna learn not to pitch. He was a very, very good pitcher. I think he's a bit an underrated pitcher because of his blown save last year. But that was not always on his own fault. It was also the Yankee infield defense behind him. And with the Mets, we have a prime shortstop playing short. Maybe we have Luis Angel Acuna playing second, and who knows what that third at first. But those two can play some defense behind him. So that's obviously going to work for him too.
Yeah, it's like I said, I have an open mind to it. I'm not necessarily as sold as you are, but and it's something you alluded to when you in your spiel there. Um, the starting pitching market is unbelievably expensive. I mean, good. I mean, we'll use Luis Severino as an example, and great for Luis Severino to go to the A's, get that 3-year, $67 million deal. I thought that's kind of what he might get, but some people were stunned by that. I was more stunned the fact that it was the A's that gave him the deal, rather more than anything. Um, but that just and it goes back to Kikuchi's contract. A guy is 34. He's getting a good chunk of change from the Angels. Um, there's another guy who got a decent deal. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I feel like maybe it'll come to me later, whatever. But the point
Blake
is,
Snell?
Blake Snell. Yep. I can't believe I forgot Blake Snell. He was like one of the biggest free
Yeah,
agents out there.
that's a
Whatever.
big name.
I don't know. But anyway, but it just I know Snell's getting deferred money. Shocker. But um I think a lot of teams are going to take this approach where they're going to look at guys that are relievers, look at their arsenals, and do their own research with their analytics people and their coaching staff and whatnot, and see if these guys are starter worthy or conversion worthy, and see if they can make a reliever into a starter. We've seen it over the years. It's worked sometimes. I mean, I put Seth Lugo in a different category compared to some other guys when it comes to relievers converting to starters and whatnot. Um, but obviously, Lopez was a really good reliever with Chicago. Goes to Atlanta and is a really good starter there. Sometimes it doesn't work. Jordan Hicks with the Giants. That didn't really work out for the Giants last year. So it's a very kind of, it's always hit or miss with relievers turning to starters. But like you said, if it doesn't work out with Clay Holmes in the rotation, you got a good bullpen arm. And I like the point you made. The fact is he might be stretched out too, so he can be a multi-inning guy, which would prove to be very beneficial for any bullpen in baseball. But the question I'll ask you is with Clay Holmes, you talked about, if you can get like 120 to 140 innings, whatever, out of Clay Holmes as a starter, assuming this goes well, he makes upper 20s starts, low 30s starts. Um, Obviously it's not a huge chunk of innings you get from a starter there. So do you think the Mets need to incorporate a six-man rotation? You already got Kodai Senga coming off the shoulder injury last year. He pitched a little bit in the postseason, as we know. Um, and there are just some guys too, like Paul Blackburn. No one talks about Paul Blackburn, but Paul Blackburn is still very much a part of this team. But he's a guy who's had injury history as well. So that's a guy, if you do six-man rotation, maybe it keeps him a little bit healthier. You got McGill there, who was really good down the stretch. Peterson. Now you have Frankie Montas. I think Frankie Montas threw about 150 innings last year for Cincinnati and Milwaukee. So do you think the Mets need to kind of think about going six-man rotation here, or do you maybe look at just finding arms that can give you multiple innings out of the bullpen and kind of offsetting it that way? What do you try to dive into the mind of David Stearns here? What do you think he's thinking about when it comes to constructing this rotation moving forward?
Six-man rotation is an option, but also let's be clear, you need way more starting pitching than six. So right now, um, if you have Tyler McGill, too bad for him because he was really good down the stretch. But that's a guy who has options. So right now he's probably looking on from the outside in. I think the six-man rotation is gonna be there because all of the reasons you mentioned. Curtis Singer was hurt. Uh, I think for Clay Holmes it works better. Um, but I don't know what the point I was trying to make there. Um, I
Got
can't remember.
no,
Uh,
no, six-man rotation. No, it's a
yeah,
possibility. I think I can agree what you're getting there. It's a possibility, for the reasons we said about Senga and whatnot. But just because you have a six-man rotation doesn't mean everyone in the six-man rotation is going to be healthy for a full 162 games. You're going to,
no,
you know,
you're still gonna need a lot more. So maybe eventually it's gonna be a five-man rotation because just how it's gonna be in a baseball season. That depends on the personnel you have. So right now, if you look at the rotation, I think it's best for them to at least be open to it for having a six-man rotation. But yeah, if you have three arms hurt and the best chance you get gonna get to win is not with one of your depth arm, it's because you have all your pitchers on a five-man rotation turn. Then it's no big deal to change that during the season. But definitely, I think there will be times. Let me say it like this: there will be times that the Mets will use a six-man rotation, no doubt in my mind. So they will definitely need to be open to that. And I remember the point I was trying to make. I think this Clay Holmes move does mean that Jose Butto is going to be in the bullpen. He's out of options. He's not going to be in the starting rotation because this is not everything the Mets going to do in the rotation. Going to do more. So he's going to be a bullpen arm, and he's going to be a bullpen arm that gives you innings because that's what you added. He's going to be a big, big part for our bullpen next year for that reason alone.
we have some breaking news. Breaking news. The Mets have made a deal. They have signed right-handed pitcher Oliver Ortega to a minor league contract. according to John
I knew,
Morosi.
I
Includes it in,
knew it's not gonna be. I knew it's not gonna be well. So
it includes an invite to big league camp. Ortega's a 28-year-old. He missed the 2024 season after undergoing surgeries to address a bone spur and loose bodies in his right elbow. So that is the latest move the New York Mets have made. Not the move people were expecting. But if you want to read into something, you can read into this as much as you want. I did see, I believe it was MLB Trade Rumors. I'm trying to pull it up now. They posted an article in with relation to Teoscar Hernandez, who is obviously going to be a very coveted free agent once the dust settles with Juan Soto. But the headline is, or whatever, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers have, quote, serious interest in Teoscar Hernandez. So read into that what you will.
no
That
Mets,
there's three teams all involved in that
no
headline
Mets.
that are involved with Juan Soto. So I don't know. Like I said, read into it as much as you want to. But that was posted about 20 minutes ago by MLB Trade Rumors on Twitter. So, like I said,
It's simple. We will see when it happens what will happen. If the passion bomb, as people on Twitter call it, is there, breaking news. Whoever team signs Juan Soto for a 15-year, $755 million deal or something like that, it's a new record. Blah 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 blah. Then we know for certain. So yeah, this the signs. I mean, the signs are still there. We know a little bit what's happening, and we know that the Mets have a fair shot at Juan Soto, and more we can't ask for right now.
yep. So we'll obviously keep people up to date on the Juan Soto. If it did break during this episode, then I mean we're already going to be like an hour episode. Then we probably be like a 2 hour episode if the Mets sign Juan Soto. But we will keep our eyes glued to Twitter, as you said. Um, but the Mets are going to be, well, the front office anyway, going to be heading to Dallas, if they're not already there, for the MLB winter meetings that are taking place at the beginning of this coming week. And obviously, this is where, though maybe not, I guess last year's not a good example, but usually there's some big moves that get made um, at the winter meetings. I know the solo trade was probably the biggest thing that happened at the winter meetings last year. It's pretty much a dead winter meetings. But you think about the year before when the Mets signed Justin Verlander, that was a big move at the winter meetings. Jacob DeGrom signed with the Texas Rangers. That was all kind of around that winter meetings time. Uh, so there's an article that you sent me that's posted on SNY, sticking on the theme of pitching and starting pitching in particular for the Mets. Um, the Mets, I believe this is via Ken Rosenthal and Will Salmon of the Athletic, report the Mets are among the teams who have expressed interest in pitcher Nathan Eovaldi. The Mets have also checked in on Jack Flaherty, Nick Pivetta, Walker Buehler, and are still keeping in touch with Sean Manaea. So obviously, we talked about the Mets will still need to continue to add pitching and whatnot. These are kind of more uh, upper market guys, I guess would be a way to put it. Um, but if the Mets, I mean, they're looking into guys like I said, Eovaldi, Flaherty, Pivetta, Buehler, Manaea. That's been reported. Um, and you said out of that bunch, there's one in particular you would like to see the Mets sign. I felt the same way. Uh, I'll let you explain why. Out of that group of pitchers, Nathan Eovaldi would be the best of the bunch.
Well, not necessarily saying the best of the bunch, but I think Nathan Eovaldi is extremely consistent as a pitcher. You know what you're going to get. I think with the projects the Mets have added, I think consistency is a big bonus. Also, we alluded to this in earlier podcast. I think it was in the 81 percentile in walk rate. So that's really good. So that's a big plug for me. And if you look at, I think the last 3 years, if you look at the basic numbers, it's pretty even. So to me, that's what the Mets need. Jack Flaherty was a guy who did very well last year, but the 2 years before that, he wasn't really good. I think you can even debate that with Shalmanaya, who I really liked, if it's Shalmanaya plays, but I bet he's gonna be. I have a feeling that Shalmanaya is gonna get a bigger deal than maybe the other guys who are on this list. For some reason, I think people really buying into the new arm slot, and for that to be a success for a lot of years. So I think he's going to be sneaky up there in value, and rightfully so. With a great year. So if it's Shalmanaya, I think Shalmanaya and Iovaldi are very close, but I think Iovaldi, um, for me, it's the durability, it's the consistency, and he is the one arm on that list for me that provides that. Mueller coming off a bad year. What's the other name? Pavetta has some good underlying numbers, but his overall numbers aren't necessarily. You think, wow, I think Iovaldi's overall numbers are better. Iovaldi always keeps his whip down because of his good walk rate. Um, so it's a little bit less nerdy reason because I'm mostly a little bit more on the nerdy side. Uh, yeah, so it's consistency. That's actually my main plus for Nathan Iovaldi.
Yeah, and obviously for a team that has high expectations, which means people expect a postseason run for the Mets, arguably maybe one of the best postseason performer pitching wise since Bumgarner. Of all these pitched a lot of big games in the postseason. I'm very intrigued by Nick Pavetta. Like you said, maybe it's the standard numbers aren't sexy. You look at what he did with Boston last year, a 6-12 record. His ERA was just a touch over 4.14. But that 1.13 WHIP, I don't think that's too terrible.
That's good.
27 appearances, 26 of those were starts. He also struck out 172 batters across 145 and two-thirds innings. So no high strikeout numbers there for Pavetta. Also, someone that's familiar with the National League East, being a former Philadelphia Philly. I don't put much stock into that, but he has some familiarity with the hitters. But I guess you could say that about every pitcher nowadays, since everyone has to play each other. Conversation for another day. And obviously, the Bueller despite not performing as well coming out of the Tommy John surgery he had, he did pitch pretty decently in the postseason. And in Flaherty, I think Flaherty is going to get to that kind of level where the Mets are going to just kind of wipe their hands and say, "Nah, we'll pass on that." I think someone's going to give Flaherty a big deal. Um, Not sure who. Um, Maybe he goes back to the Dodgers. I suggested that earlier, but in the offseason, but now with Snell uh, going there, I think maybe that takes the Dodgers out. But there's no doubt in my mind. I think Flaherty could get a nice 4 or 5 year deal somewhere. With what team? Not sure. Um, and then Mania, I think Mania is going to get priced out for the Mets. Some people talk about maybe he'll take a 3 year with a high AAV, whatever. I don't see it. I think these guys want um, they want I mean, obviously they want to get paid. Who doesn't want to get freaking paid? I mean, come on. But I also think at these stages in their careers, they probably like to have the security of being in a place and just calling it good, especially for a guy like Mania who's mid 30s. Uh, he's going to be, I don't want to say he's on the back nine, but he did his 1 year deal. He did a short term thing. He's going to look for some contract length, I would think. Um, if that's the Mets, cool. No, I'd be happy to see Sean Manaea back, much like I would have been happy to see Severino back. But I just think that's probably going to be elsewhere. And we should note before the A's signed Severino, the report was they were looking to bring Manaea back on a nice contract. So that just kind of says there that Manaea is going to get a good, probably 4 year deal, and I think that's a little bit out of Mets' comfort zone with that. Another pitcher that's going to be talked a lot about is Roki Sasaki. I believe you sent me it yesterday, Pat, from Jeff Passan. It said he's going to be posted, I think at the beginning of the winter meeting, so probably within less than 24 hours. Um, and obviously, that's another coveted Pitcher, those are S and Y. Mets are expected to be, quote, significant players for Roki Sasaki, who will officially be posted at the winter meetings. Um, but there's despite this being like the Mets are going to be serious, have serious interests, significant players, whatever. It just really, really feels like this is just going to be a Dodgers kind of thing. Um, whether that's the case or
It,
not, I don't know, but it just feels
it,
Dodgers to me.
it's a little bit tricky now with him being a guy you have to put your international pool money. So it also depends on what. I mean, the Mets have invested 5 million for Elian Pena, or they have a quote unquote deal with him, and they still can back out of that, I think. So it's going to be interesting which team will do that right now. I don't think the Mets will do that, honestly. I think they see a lot in Elian Pena. So I think he was the second best prospect on the Baseball America list. So it's a little bit more complicated, not a little bit out of my reach with how it's now all works with Roki Sasaki. Um, but I also think it's maybe a little bit more complicated for the Dodgers too, because I know that they have invested or have a deal with some pretty darn good um, international prospects that they might have to drop now to get Roki Sasaki. And I think Roki Sasaki obviously is in a different league than all those prospects we mentioned. Roki Sasaki is a little bit more known. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a little bit more interesting than I think a lot of people think. And I'm curious how it will end up. I don't think, I think obviously the Dutch are the front runner, but I think it could be anybody's game right now, honestly.
Yeah, and you talk about the international pool money. The Mets just trade away some of that money. We'll get into that in a
Yeah.
second, but um, I just, I mean, maybe it's like you said. He's not like Yamamoto last off season, where it's just a straight free agent. You have with this, you have to invest some of your international money, which opens it up for a lot more teams. Um, So we'll see what happens with that. It just feels very Dodgers to me. I don't know. It's just because of Yamamoto, Otani. It seems like the Dodgers are just the place to go if you're a Japanese player. Um, and maybe I don't know. Maybe that'll change. I know the Mets got Kodai Senga, but that's more in the Yamamoto category than the Sasaki category when it comes to the free agency and whatnot. But we'll see. Maybe Sasaki signs with the Mets. Maybe he signs with the Tampa Bay Rays because the Rays just got some international pool money from the New York Mets in exchange for a minor league right-hander, Sean Harney. This deal was announced on Friday. Harney's a 26-year-old, was in Double A mostly last season. 124 strikeouts across 124 and two-thirds relief in the minors. That's in his career. It's also 44 walks in that time, so not a bad walk rate. Um, just kind of an arm the Mets are going to take a shot on, I would say.
Yeah.
You got nothing to lose. I mean, you just gave away international pool money. Um, so I don't think, like I said, it's very much. It's kind of like a minor league. It's like when you sign a guy to a minor league contract, like you just did with this Ortega guy. You got nothing to lose really. Um, so get him in your system, see what happens. It's a guy who's in the upper levels of the minor leagues. Like I say, pitched Double A last year, so he could start the year in Triple A Syracuse, and maybe he gets a shot in the Mets bullpen and he does really well. Who knows? Um, but just a minor move there for the Mets. But one that if you're complaining about this move, then you really are just trying to find things to complain about, in my mind.
Well, a lot of people complain about dead moves all the time in their comments, with always the same woo. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know Sean Harney. I didn't know him before that, but that doesn't make it that's the only thing that the Mets do. Obviously not. Uh, the international money, by the way, that was probably becoming a waste anyway, because most of those contracts are already talked about. So So it's actually getting a player for nothing.
Yeah, yeah, it really is getting the player for nothing. The Mets also made another minor league free agent move. Actually, they made a couple. They brought some guys back since we last talked. But from to bring someone outside the organization in, it's Edward Olivares. He's a 28-year-old outfielder, 5-year career with the Padres, Royals, most recently the Pirates. He actually had a decent season with the Royals a few years ago, back in 2023. Um, Struggled with Pittsburgh last year. Ended up getting DFA'd around, I believe June, July, if I remember doing my research correctly. So another guy, just bring in, give you some outfield depth. You know, it's an invite to big league camp. So once again, a move you got absolutely nothing to lose in. And then the two other guys who were gone and now they've come back, Grant Hartwig and Alex Ramirez that are back in the Mets organization on minor league deals. So they were not gone very long, and it's kind of funny because we talked about particularly Alex Ramirez in I believe our last episode. Um, Talked about all the things that went wrong for him and why the Mets are moving on, but the Mets are, I guess, are not really fully moving on from Alex Ramirez. They were just moving on from him from a 40-man roster perspective. Any anything stand out about Olivares, Brayton Hartwig, or Ramirez back to you?
Well, I think Ramirez is always good, although we've been hard on him last podcast. I think he's obviously still young. So it's good to have him back in our organization, and hopefully he can return his value. Hardwick, same. Um, he's a guy you might see return if the need is that huge, or he has a really good year in AAA. And Olivares, I think he was an above average hitter in 2022 and 2023, like you said. So I think to have that as a depth, knowing that he can be an above average hitter not long ago. And in the Venezuelan Winter League, he's now having an 11.28 OPS, so he's been raking there in 21 games. So definitely Mets probably see something they like. Um, and like you said, if it's not, it's depth. It's Rafael Ortega, or he's younger than that, but you catch my drift. It's a guy who might be um, getting some major league at bats for you if there's a desperate need, but obviously you hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see Olivares. You know, you never know with these minor league moves. I mean, who thought the Jose Iglesias was going to have a big impact as he did last year? And that was a minor league pickup around this time. So you never know with these minor league guys when they get their chance, they could very well take advantage of it. So that's the latest the Mets have done. Obviously, we talked about they're heading to Texas for the winter meetings. Um, there's some guys on the upper echelon that we've talked about, Evaldi, Flaherty, Mania. But there's still some guys that are out there that could very much fit into the Jeremy Hefner, Dr. Frankenstein pitching lab. Um, so there's some guys that are out there. I mean, we always focus on pitching. Maybe there's a hitter out there too. Um, so I guess this is kind of a pseudo make your pitch um, segment, if we want to call it that. There's a
It's
guy.
our make our pitch, Andrew.
Okay.
Don't budge this.
Well,
It's our make. You have to make your pitch because you're gonna start now. So make your pitch, Andrew.
all right. Well, I guess we're going to make a pitch here. Um, this guy just was non-tendered by the Colorado Rockies. Um, it's Cal Quantrill. Now, I think you look at, you hear the name, you think, well, he was a decent prospect coming up, pitched decently early in his, tenure, Padres, Cleveland, and then kind of just fell off a bit with injuries, I believe was an issue for him. Resurfaced to Colorado, pitched 29 games, so he made like a full year's worth of starts. And the thing that this is kind of like a Frankie Montas thing. You probably don't need to look at the baseball savant page when it comes to percentiles because they're not very good. But the thing about Cal Quantrill that made me think this is a guy that the Mets could pursue is his pitch arsenal. Last year, obviously in Colorado, probably have to throw a sinker a lot to get ground balls. He threw that 40% of the time. The next one was a split at 32%, and then a cutter at 13%. Those were his three most used pitches last year. Three pitches that it seems like this regime tends to focus on. And maybe there's something there where they say, you know what, let's get you out of Colorado. Maybe these pitches will be a little bit more effective, uh, not a mile high above sea level. And when you get into a ballpark like City Field. So Kyle Quantrill is a guy, 29 years old too. So he's same age as Jack Flaherty, who's 29 years old. I believe Walker Buehler's kind of in that same age range as well. So, uh, no, definitely more of a project guy. Um, but if the pitch arsenal stays the way it is, then the Mets want to have him throw sinkers or splits or cutters. I'd be curious to get him into the Jeremy Hefner pitching lab and see what Dr. Hefner can spit out.
Oh, you're gonna love my pick for next week, by the way. But I'm gonna for our next episode. I think you're gonna be shocked with what I have in my mind there. But maybe people are shocked with what I have in my mind for this episode. Make my pitch or make your pitch. Make my pitch. It's also a guy from the Rockies, but it's a trade, and it's not a pitcher. It's third baseman Ryan McMahon. Oh no, I think people are gonna think he was a slight below average hitter if you look at par adjusted OPS plus. So that 95 he was last year. However, there are some good underlying stats. Hard hit percent in the 93rd percentile, average exit velocity in the 91st percentile. He has a solid walk rate in the 79 percentile. So his expected OPS is above at average at 749. Also, that's also park adjusted. So I know his road and home numbers are bad, but I also think you should consider, I think playing in altitude most of the time at home, it also makes you adjust when you go on the road, which make your road numbers maybe worse than it should be. So it's not only that it helps you at home, it also um, decreases your productivity on the road, I believe. So it's going to even out if you go away there, I believe. Um, Still, he's a very consistent hitter. Um, Only big difference this year was his hard hit rate went from 44% to 49%. Still strikes out a lot, but there's 20 home runs every year over the last 4 years. But for me, the main plus is his defense. McMahon had a 7 outs above average and plus 10 DRS last year. Since 2021, he's been one of the best third basemen according to outs above average. And over his last 4 seasons, McMahon has accumulated 12.4 BWAR, which is a 3.1 BWAR average per season. I think that's very good. Still has 3 years, $44 million left on his contract, which for me, for an everyday third baseman, isn't much. So I would definitely take that. And we know the Rockies will always like to spread out money any way they can. So I think that the prospect cost would be very low for a 29-year-old, very solid glove third baseman that still provides some pop and some hard hit rates.
Hell, they might get the Rockies to pay half that contract. The way they're run.
They
terrible
probably
or
have to. Yeah,
terrible organization. The
yeah, yeah.
worst run organization in baseball. Colorado Rockies. So people might say the A's, but that's an ownership thing. That's an ownership issue. The Rockies are the dumbest organization in baseball. No question about it. So
So always good to try to trade with the Rockies, I would say.
right,
So
exactly. Yeah. I suggested at the trade deadline last year Austin Gomber, you know,
mm,
for as a potential sneaky pickup. So
yeah.
maybe the Mets will call about Austin Gomber. Who knows? Um, but yeah, and if McMahon plays that kind of defense he did against the Mets, oof, that would be that'd be awesome. If the Mets could get that at third base, and then you shift Vientos or whatever to first base, or have Vientos DH full time, whatever. Who knows? Um, but that's a very interesting make your pitch. I like how we both went with the Rockies. Obviously, I went with the free agent route. You went with more of the trade route. But no, I'd be very interested in the Brian McMahon pickup. No doubt about that. We are quickly approaching 1 hour, which I think means it's time to wrap up the show. Uh, but we thank you very much for listening. We also thank Mr. Corne Hogeveen for joining us and sharing his insights, and uh, already making a bold claim that Clay Holmes will indeed be the steal of the off season. Now we still have to wait and see to if that actually comes true or whatnot. But we're counting down the days till pitchers and catchers spring training. I think it's 70 something days. I don't know if that's for pitchers and catchers or actual spring training games beginning, but it's hard to believe we're already getting close to mid June, and by mid February, there's going to be players reporting to Port St. Lucie. So the off season is maybe going by a little bit quicker than it feels like, just because everyone's waiting for the Juan Soto domino to fall, and then everything else will fall after that. But anyway, we thank you, Mr. Hogeveen, for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you, and we'll see if we have an extra one on the Mets.
Wow, you're really funny. You're really, really funny. I see what you did there. All right. This has been episode number 52 of the Queen's Connection, a production of Patent Sports Creative. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you listen, Spotify, YouTube. Also, make sure to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Just search the Queen's Connection. And thank you very much for listening. And maybe next time we'll have a big breaking news podcast to do, or maybe it'll just be a status quo episode, but you'll have to just wait and find out on the Queen's Connection.